tardes, mi gente. Qué placer estar aquí con ustedes. I am deeply grateful to the Department of Health, to Julian Drix in particular, for inviting me to join you on the 6-month anniversary of Hurricane Maria dropping down and devastating Puerto Rico. I am Boricua from Brooklyn. And so, as a climate justice, as someone who works in the climate justice movement, when Hurricane Maria touched down in Puerto Rico, it felt like my worlds had collided. It has been an intense, mindful struggle for the last 6 months from the Puerto Rican diaspora, with a lot of love, a lot of resistance, a lot of support for sovereignty, for decolonizing Puerto Rico, for fighting for free Puerto Rico, for our liberation. I am a woman of African and indigenous ancestry, a descendant of colonization and slavery. And so when I talk about issues having to do with climate justice, when I talk about issues having to do with environmental justice and the survivability of my people, my perspective is rooted in being a descendant of extraction. And so that is who we are. And so I hope and I pray, I ask the ancestors to provide me with the voice or with something that will hopefully transform your spirit so that you walk out of here knowing that we need to be beautiful, knowing that we need to be the badasses that climate change demands, that we need to speak for ourselves, that people will need to check their privilege if we are going to succeed in this fight to address the biggest challenge in the history of people. And so that is my prayer today, that I am able to do that with you. Just in 2017, we saw 10 consecutive Atlantic hurricanes. A historical first, Irma was the strongest storm to reach beyond the Caribbean. Harvey brought the greatest rainfall, and months after Maria wrought unprecedented devastation. About 500,000 Puerto Ricans are still in the dark. As we speak, there are 500,000 Puerto Ricans still in the dark. From the global south and South Brooklyn, the time for incremental solutions is over. Really, the time to do something radical is now, because our survival depends on it. And so when you think about climate justice really is the intersection of racial injustice and climate change. And what does that mean for the front line, for people of color, for people who think that, a lot of times when you hear about environmental justice, people act like it's 20 years old, it's a movement that's 20, 25 years old, but the truth is, environmental justice really started, or injustice started in the slave quarters. It started when people had the worst food, the worst health care, were put in places where they were exposed to the most toxics, to toxicants. That's really where it started. It started with the exploitation of our people, with the extraction of our land, and the extraction of our labor. And so it's important for us to understand that, but because when we're talking about public health, there is a way of looking at public health and looking at outcomes and thinking about the kinds of systems that have contributed to our health without looking at the fact that we are descendants of all of this. And that it has been generation after generation after generation that has basically been vulnerable to a lot of stress and to a lot of conditions that result in disease. And so we are particularly vulnerable to climate change. And then the other thing that happens often is that people like using the word resilience. We in the movement have some problems with the word resilience. Two main things that are difficult with the word for us. One is resilience means to bounce back. It means that you go back to where you were before there was an extreme weather event or disaster. What does that mean for people of African and indigenous ancestry to bounce back? Does it mean to bounce back to displacement, to police brutality, to being put in conditions that are unacceptable and violate our basic human rights? Is that what that means? Is that what it meant in New Orleans? Is that what it's going to mean in Puerto Rico to bounce back to colonialism? So the word resiliency is a word that's packed with a lot. The other thing about the word resiliency is that there's always this assumption that those of us, the ones who survived, are resilient because we survived. That somehow we're stronger, that we can handle anything that comes at us, right? So we have challenges with that word, and we embrace the word resistance to say that we are going to decolonize our diet, decolonize our minds, really think about space, reclaim our traditions, reclaim traditions that made us the people who have always lived within our carbon footprint, because those are the things that are going to help us survive. Basically being able to reclaim what we lost when we became westernized, when capitalism and colonialism turned us into dependence on another lifestyle that was based on extreme consumption. So those are the things that are going to help us survive, and that's part of our challenge, to basically culturally reclaim those spaces and reclaim that. When people think about climate change, there's also a lot of talk about flooding and sea level rise, storm surges and high winds, because that's sexy. That the media loves that. But the truth is that what's going to kill our folks is drought, excessive heat. And so it's really important to really focus on the number of things that will be challenging in terms of climate change. And for EJ communities, this is a community that lives next to a port in an industrial waterfront community. What happens in an extreme weather event when you live right next to the toxic exposure? My organization is located in the largest significant maritime industrial area in New York City, in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. You know what that means? That means that what will happen here is what happened in Puerto Rico, where there were 23 Superfunds. Can you imagine 23 Superfunds and that tiny island? Highly hazardous materials in that tiny little island. So what happens is that when there is an extreme weather event, fugitive dust, the air, the water, the soil, all become contaminated, and that moves. That moves into your windows, into your rooftops, into your pores, into your water, into the school windows, into the narrow air passages of your children, and the air passages of your elders. That's what happens when you live next to uncontainerized chemicals on an industrial waterfront. So what it means for a community like Rhode Island, and you all have the answers. I'm not going to tell you what the answers are for you. I'm going to talk about what happens in Sunset Park, is that we fought to retrofit and to basically make those industries operate in a way that's cleaner, because we can't also lose them. Because losing them means that we lose jobs, and losing them also means that the industrial waterfront becomes commercialized, and we have luxury housing, and our people get pushed out completely. And that destroys social cohesion. We lose our jobs, we lose the place we live, we can't walk to work, and it destroys the ability for us to, again, survive extreme weather events. So it sounds really doom and gloom, right? And it sounds pretty overwhelming, and I think it is. I think it is all overwhelming, and we need to address climate change with the kind of humility and respect that it demands, because Mother Earth is pissed. And so it really means that we need to respect that what is happening right now is the manifestation of years and years of extraction and abuse to basically make a few greedy people happy at the expense of our people and at the expense of our future. So it's really important that we treat it with that respect. And I think everybody who's here is here because they believe. I don't think there's a single climate denier in this group. Is there one? I didn't think so. I don't engage two kinds of people. I don't engage racists or climate deniers. Because I'm here for a second, and I'm going to live this life the best way I can. And so I don't engage either one.